This week on the SupaHuman podcast, what are you seeing in terms of the use of AI across the space industry to help accelerate where everyone's going?
New Zealand is a Rolls Royce of manufacturing, that we have world-class manufacturing here in New Zealand that is yet to be discovered.
It's fascinating to hear that we are kind of world leading in this space.
There are deep tech companies around New Zealand and internationally, all always looking and scouting.
Talk us through that journey before we kind of really unlock where New Zealand's at with the current space industry. Jess is a leader in all things space here in New Zealand. Fascinating podcast, really great to hear her mission on her showcasing all the huge capability we have here for space manufacturing in New Zealand. Fascinating listen. We hope you enjoy it. Jess, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Space,
Yes.
probably not the final frontier, or maybe the final frontier. Where I don't know if I told you. I mean, we've known each other for quite a while, but I don't know if I told this about you. Back when I was at school, it was either a zookeeper or an astronaut were the two things that they said I should do at school, and I've done neither of those. But I think in 2024, it's definite to say that I think there are two things emerging massively within the tech sector. One is unlocking space, and the other is the use of artificial intelligence. And obviously, from a SupaHuman perspective, we represent one of those. But there's definitely a crossing of these paths between unlocking the vastness of space and the amount of research that's going to need to go on to how we make humans multiplanetary, which seems to be the way that most of the space industry is starting to think about it, or at least the big players. And then how New Zealand is faring within space. And like speaking to you over the last couple of weeks, I think it's evident to say that there's so much going on that I don't think anyone listening to this podcast will know about. But a little bit about you. So from Levin, that's where you originally came from?
God, Dave, did you really say that? Yes, Levin. But, I think the street skills really help with that.
Yep.
Business acumen, and brought up down there really taught me a lot. But my parents owned an outdoor pursuit centre in the middle of the Taura Ranges, and I was a abseiling instructor at 15 and had a very wholesome upbringing, which was really nice. But at 18, 19, you lose interest in horses and work, and it becomes more about boys. And so my mum sent me on a bus to Auckland. I had saved up money working at a travel agency with $600 and couch to sleep on in Auckland, and left to figure it out.
So tell me about the pathway to get to where you're at today. I mean, if you're looking at through your approach to technology, there's been a definite sales bent to that, but now more recently, over the past 3 or 4 years, representing the New Zealand tech sector, both from a space trailblazers perspective and from an engineering standpoint. So talk us through that journey before we kind of really unlock where New Zealand's at with the current space industry.
Yeah, sure. Look, I'll put this simply. I saw a model. I spent 2-3 years trying to understand the space industry, and I saw a lot of similarities between the tech sector and the space sector since it becomes commercialized. So I don't know how old the audience is that is listening here, but we're talking about you can use these two on either side. You've got your product, you've got your software, you've got your services, you've got your investors, you've got your events. It's all the same systems, but for different areas and different reasons. And space could really use a lot of what we've learnt in the tech sector, and bringing that into space is what I'm trying to do.
And is that because you see that space and the industry that surrounds the space tech sector, because tech is within the space industry as well, it's not a totally isolated industry.
Totally.
Has been highly government-led not from a New Zealand perspective, but definitely from an overseas perspective, and they've not necessarily needed the same stable of skills such as sales, marketing, product management, exposure. It's been R&D focused mainly, right?
That's right. That is right. And in the States, this has been, they've been partying around space since the 50s. And it has been very well developed within governments, but it was very much just governmentalized. Whereas with Elon, he's really helped bring out that commercial aspect which has allowed a lot of other companies to play in this area. And these companies haven't just evolved out of nowhere. They've pivoted from other areas, and mostly it's from the technology area.
And do you see this as because the component parts of space, so the individual technologies that make up space programs, are just far more freely available now than they ever have been? So a space organization or someone that's interested in building a value proposition that's around the exploration of that sector, they've just got far more access to parts, technology, software than they've ever had before, right?
Yeah. But it is still very much relationship based. So at the moment, I founded Space Trailblazer just recently. Actually, I think it's 5 weeks old, but it's 3 years in the making. And I won a Callaghan seed grant called the Adult Here Trailblazer Seed Grant in August last year. Hence the name of my new company, Space Trailblazer. And it gave me over Christmas a chance to really understand, because no one else in New Zealand has this, is an understanding of what the space ecosystem is, who are the players, who's involved in manufacturing, who's the startups, who's the investors, and really creating that platform. So that's what the Space Trailblazer IP is. And where I saw a really big opportunity here very, very quickly was with our manufacturers.
And is that a case of there's probably a truism of how New Zealand has played out over the last numerous decades of we're actually very, very good at these niche skill sets, yet we tend to not blow our own trumpet that often, which is kind of adversely different in other markets. I mean, from a European and American standpoint, it's kind of the opposite, market first, build second, whereas it seems to be the opposite way around here. Actually, there's probably a lot of latent capability that's just not exposed.
Yeah, I think the best way to put this for everyone to understand right now is New Zealand is a Rolls-Royce of manufacturing. Our equipment, the tools that I've seen over the last week, so I held an event on Monday, and every day since I've been invited into manufacturers to see their sites, each one of their tooling machines is around $500,000. And it is insane the level of production that they're doing. And it's not known. No, it's not known. And a lot of these manufacturers are 30 to 40 years old. And so they've got that sophistication, they've got that wisdom. They understand that they're not just going to put all their eggs in one basket. It's not just going to be space. But it's certainly, most definitely, the area that they want to invest in. And some of these companies start from everything from the R&D right through to the CAD, to the production, to the quality assurance. And the quality assurance and the regulations and policies isn't just monitored and assessed by New Zealand, but it's monitored on the world stage. And I can safely say that we have world-class manufacturing here in New Zealand that is yet to be discovered. A lot of these companies are working individually with international space companies, and they've been traditionally under very strict NDAs, which we hugely protect, and I agree with. But what I've done through Space Trailblazer is create a ranking system. So there is no names exchanged between, what their experience has been, but more what have they had a ITAR, if anyone knows what that means. It's the International Trade Surveillance and Regulations with America, which is very hard to do. It's project driven, not driven by a client. If you've done one of those projects, you would have been assessed quite heavily. So that would be a category 1. A category 2 would be a manufacturer that's had a space client, and category 3 would be a company that has a space. A product fit for space, but not yet has a space client. And there are plenty of those. But what that does is that removes any names and we take away any branding. And so we can have these conversations and then help build these international relations, and then NDAs and things are signed, and then they can then grow. So what we're trying to do is just be that piece in the middle to be able to transition these guys from here to being here.
So in your view, how much have the likes of New Zealand Trade and Enterprise got a part to play in helping that exposure for New Zealand talent and capability here, on the basis that there's strict NDAs in place, but are they playing their part right now in terms of exposure of the space industry overseas?
Absolutely. I think there's 900 people located all over the world under the umbrella of Trade and Enterprise, and they're doing a fantastic job. We've got Rob Cunningham in Washington and Marta Major, and they are heavily involved in huge advocates for New Zealand and the space industry. But we can't just rely on these guys overseas. We need to back them up. We need to be presenting what we can. And if we don't have anything to present, then I kind of feel like, we're letting the team down. So we need to play our part here. Chris Burgess has just been assigned here in Trade Enterprise in Auckland, and he's got a fantastic background, and he's looking after export, and he's very much involved in this, and everybody wants this to work.
So in terms of the role that your organisation is playing in promoting the New Zealand space industry, what initiatives have you got over the course of the next 3 to 6 to 12 months, and what's your approach to going, okay, let's light a fire under this and expose the talent?
Yeah, right. So because of these NDAs and there's nowhere where I can go to find these manufacturers who have space clients. So it is all about awareness. And so I held an event at Outset Ventures, which is where I'm based, which is also where Rocket Lab was founded, and they have a ton of, they incubated a ton of great new talent. But we hosted an event there on Monday, and we had manufacturers come in for the first time, and the energy was electric, and we had MFAT, and we had Brett O'Reilly from EMA, and we were just working together, and it was vibing. And this is what has been missing in New Zealand. And I think the government does their part, the manufacturers do their part. We've got our space individuals that do their part, but there's no one to come in and get everybody together in an environment to say, hey, guys, let's work together. And that's what I'm doing. So the next event is in Christchurch, because Christchurch has a big space ecosystem as well as manufacturing ecosystem on the 9th of April. And then every day I'm going to try and do a site tour. And I've also got Jill Daldin, who's amazing, and she's down in Christchurch, and she's going to be doing what I'm doing up here in Auckland and Christchurch. And then we're going to divvy it up around the country, and we're going to work through the country. So we will eventually have a portfolio of manufacturers here in New Zealand, and that will be presented to our international allies, of which at the same time as I'm doing this, I'm also working with our international allies to build up those relationships, so that when we present our country to them, that we're presenting it in the right way and giving them what they're asking for.
Got it. So what's the ultimate goal for you with relationship to both Space Trailblazers and Engineering Dreams? Is there an end goal, or are you just talk me through what's driving you to do the work that you're doing?
Engineering Dreams or Space Trailblazer?
Space Trailblazer, yeah.
Space Trailblazer, I want the company to be owned not by me, but by the country. I want all the world. I want to create a tribe of trailblazers. I want everybody to feel encouraged and welcomed. And, no one's ostracized from this. If you've got a good idea and you want to be part of it, you can be. And the goal for me is really, for New Zealand, I want to see a really strong economy. I want to see international money pumped in. I want to see this being one of our largest economies. That would be, for me, the end goal. And I think we can get there. Every day, and more that I see of our capabilities here, it just blows my mind, and I just can't wait to get this out. So I'm running as fast as I can to present this out to the world, because I think with our currency, yes, we are an island, but we have the capabilities to manufacture now, not in 6 months' time. We have a very good exporting capabilities here. Of course we have. It's been established a very long time ago. And we have international allies, especially because we're part of the Five Eyes. There's nothing holding us back apart from the fact that we just don't have the portfolio built just yet.
But the portfolio content exists. It's just a case of
It does.
exposure of that
It does.
compliant way. And
It does.
it feels like we're punching above our weight in terms of execution, but we're doing the traditional way that I think a lot of sectors have been done here in New Zealand, which we don't necessarily talk about it enough.
No, that's it. Yeah, that's exactly right. And manufacturers would admit that. But, you know, some of these manufacturers, most of them, have been operating for 30 or 40 years. And they're the coolest sites. I will host under Space Trailblazer. My clients will be doing tours, and I'll be showcasing all of my clients around these sites, because I think the more we all share them, the more we all see, the better it is. And that's why people come to Space Trailblazer. It's because they have been a manufacturer, but they haven't been involved in the space industry, and they want to see what the space industry looks like here in New Zealand. So we have exclusive access to a lot of sites now for these tours for our clients. And I think that'll just help build up the momentum and the awareness of what we have here.
I was speaking to a company. I saw them at an expo maybe 2 years ago, and they were a New Zealand boat boom manufacturer.
Okay, yes.
Who would then, it was publicly acknowledged that they were doing work with NASA about using the same carbon fiber technologies to build parts of the space station.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's probably a misconception that to be in the space game, you need to be a space manufacturer. And the reality is component manufacturer and material manufacturing, it's the basis of the space programs, right? So, and I think that's key, that we've always had a decent manufacturing and world-leading manufacturing capability here, but not just space, but now we're now using a lot of those components to form these space components.
Yeah, that's right. So the industries and manufacturers that you would see that I was talking with 34, you mean the yacht building, anyone that's manufacturing anything in medical, high precision manufacturing, all of those manufacturers have been tapped on the shoulder to manufacture something for space. And of course, with the good old Kiwi attitude, it's yeah, mate, we can do it. And that has really done us great justice. So, you know, we can take on anything, and that is an absolute strength for New Zealand. And the ambition in New Zealand is huge, which is, you know, I do feel like we are a little bit of a Silicon Valley, but we just need to be more outward.
What do you see as the crossover of these more emergent technologies that aren't based on physical material or manufacturing? So with the emergence of AI becoming abundantly ubiquitous across business now, and space being highly research-led, what are you seeing in terms of the use of AI across the space industry to help accelerate where everyone's going?
I think it plays a big part. And that is because we have the data sets from a very, very long time ago. We have a lot of data. And AI presents things further than what we humanly can see ourselves. The only part of that is risky is it making it up and making assumptions past what is real. But if we can learn to harness that, and we can really focus on what is important, and there's also that commercial side, right? There's no point in going out and trying to focus on something where there's no funding for that. You've got to have that commercial aspect. But one thing that's really exciting is that we're talking about manufacturing here on Earth now for components that will help us get up into space. And we've got our Artemis Accords, which New Zealand is part of, for lunar landings and Mars landings. But the next frontier will be about how can we manufacture in space? How can we have that sustainability up there? And so that's the next exciting part, and that's where I see AI potentially being really helpful.
And I suppose that's, fundamental principles of physics change when you're in zero gravity or low gravity, right? So everything we've assumed of how you do stuff on Earth is super different.
Well, yeah, humans were, the evolution was that we were made for Earth. We were not made for outer space. We were not made for the lunar or Mars. So we're trying to recreate Earth in these other areas, right? Everything outside of Earth will kill us. So how do we, what are the sophisticated manufacturing that we can make that would help us up there? So, that's the next exciting part. But there hasn't been a lot of focus on that. We're sort of a step back from that. Right now, our focus is the landing on the lunar and the landing on the moon, and then, the sustainability. How do we survive up there?
So with what you're seeing out in the industry, both the domestic industry here and overseas, where do you think the industry that you're in, we'll call it space for the purposes of this, where do you think you're going to be in 5 years' time?
I think in 5 years' time, New Zealand will be much more amalgamated with the supply chain internationally, and we could potentially maybe have another launch site. I know that was on National's agenda. That would be really exciting. I think New Zealand will really adapt to the space industry and have innovation centres around the world. I know Stu Potter, who is from Stardust Me, he is down in Gisborne at the moment, lobbying to have an innovation centre down there. So it's happening. The problem we're having is that we just need to bring in more of that export money and awareness, and the supply chain of manufacturing, I think, might be a good answer to that.
Great. One final question from me. You mentioned Outside Ventures. Is it Outside Ventures?
Yes.
Yeah, and what we're doing with those guys. So from a venture perspective, and I know I'm not making an assumption that you're affiliated necessarily with venture capital, but in terms of the startup scene in New Zealand, you mentioned that there are manufacturers that have been in the game quite a while who have pivoted and or brought in extra portfolio items to go, okay, cool, we can now look at using our technologies and methodologies to produce space parts or components. Are you seeing any startup hustle in New Zealand around, okay, businesses that are being born out of the ground today that are focusing on space and the unlocking of that value down the line?
Hugely. Yes, and I mean, there are deep tech companies around New Zealand and internationally, all always looking and scouting all the time. I talk about Outside Ventures is because I hot desk out of there.
Mm-hmm.
And I hot desk out of there because it's an ecosystem of people who are like-minded and at the forefront and really just starting up. And Angus, Mike and Matt, who run the company, are fantastic at incubating these guys. So yes, I work very closely with them. And Trinary, which is another startup, which actually has Peter Beck backing it, made up with Andy, who was the rocket scientist for the Rutherford engine for Rocket Lab. Sean Malloy's on that team. Those guys are building something really cool. You'll hear about that very soon. So yeah, everything is happening there, and venture capitalists they are the starting point for startups and incubating.
Well, Jess, it's fascinating to hear that we are kind of world leading in this space, and from a guy who was destined to be an astronaut when I was 16 years old and never quite got there. That's good to see from my perspective. So thank you very much.
Late.
I was too late.
Too late, Dave.
It was my eyes. It was all about my eyes. I had them lasered now, so I'm fine. It's okay.
Try again.
There's still a dream. I can still be a Premiership footballer and an astronaut.
There you go.
But it's just great to see that the industry is booming and there's so much more yet to unlock. We're really, really excited about the convergence of that maturing industry, the advancements in manufacturing and AI to help drive that forward. But your expertise is fantastic to hear. Where are people best to go to find out more about the work that you're doing?
Check out my website, spacetrailblazer.space, actually. Spacetrailblazer.space. Our information is there. Give me a call and come and trailblaze with us.
Yeah, great. Sounds good. All right. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me.